Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Christian Doyle. I'm the founder at Core. We're an international recruitment company. We deal at mid to senior level across our kind of chosen sectors. We're running this interview series and we're meeting up with lots of different entrepreneurs, business leaders, HR professional, marketing gurus who are sharing their insights about the sectors that they operate within. And all of these interviews can be viewed on our website, www.corerecruitment.com, or our YouTube channel. Now, really lucky to be joined today by Tim, who is the head lead people person at Stonegate. And I feel a little bit like part of the Stonegate family because Nina Marshall came and spoke at our International Women's Day event. David McDowell came and spoke at International Women's Day as well. Sam did an interview for us, who kind of like leads a lot of their pub operations. Nigel from Wagamama just went over there. They've got some amazing people within the business, but I don't think, and especially if you're not from that sector, you may not be aware, but Stonegate is the biggest pub company in the world by number of venues, and yet they've managed to reduce the number of people that they have within the organization by 8,000 in recent times. So we're really lucky to be joined by Tim today, who's going to be sharing a little bit about himself and the business as well. How are you, Tim?
Really good, Christian. How you doing?
Very good. I did warn you that I go like the game show host when I record these things. And he's looking at me going like, "Is
Very
he going to stop
impressive.
breathing?"
Very impressive.
So thanks very much for joining us. Could you just start off by giving us a little bit about yourself, your role, and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the group HRD at Stonegate Group, like you say, biggest pub company in the. We talk about the UK, but because the UK is a kind of unique pub landscape, it is actually the biggest in the world, which is still slightly weird. Um, Always been in HR. HR is kind of my thing. Started in retail, predominantly food retail, so did a lot of food retail, and then had the chance to come over to Stonegate 14 years ago now, just a year after the business was formed, when our investors TDR set the business up, and best career move I ever made. It's an amazing business with amazing people, and I absolutely love what we do.
So to get us kicked off now, this you because you weren't from pubs originally, and and we recruit across a lot of different sectors, and pubs from a culture perspective are pretty unique in all of those kind of businesses. And you tend to find that, especially at senior level, people that move across HR, finance, marketing, human resources, operations, either come in like yourself and they're there forever and they're just pub people and they get it and it's amazing, or you tend to find that they're in and out kind of like, quite quickly. Culturally, why do you think that is, and what is it you think about the pub sector that either retained, like that either magnetizes people or demagnetizes people
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
quickly?
It's a really interesting question. I think you're right, and I've seen that. I've seen people coming in from outside of sector and just loving it and staying, or to your point, perhaps not finding it great. And of course, I've only worked for one pub company, which is Stonegate, so I've only got that perspective. But I think from talking to others in the sector and looking around, I, I, I think some of it is affiliation with what we do. There's something about pubs which is unique. You you can't just like pubs or feel ambivalent, but you've got to love them.
Hmm.
And I think you've got to love what we do and immerse yourself in that. And for me, that's never been an issue because I've always enjoyed being in pubs. It's something I've always loved doing. But I do think it's something you've got to really, really just get under the skin of. I think the culture tends to be very. It, a lot of people talk about fast pace, yeah, but in my experience, this is way faster than anything. You just got to crack on, really, really accept that it kind of almost takes hold of you and has got a life of its own, and embrace that and enjoy it. I think it's still that it's got huge positives, informality, non-hierarchical stuff. There's some real positives in pub world that I think sometimes other sectors have almost just become very, very corporate in their approach. It's not the most corporate approach. But I think above all, it's just that intuitive emotional connection with what we do.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, over that your tenure with the business, I mean, you guys have not stood still. You've been doing acquisitions, you've been reshaping, you've been redefining kind of like over that period of time. There's been incredible growth within the business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an incredible. It's quite interesting. I obviously at one level I've been doing the same job for 14 years, and at another level I feel like I've done several different jobs during that period of time. I mean, to try and summarize it, the business was started with 330 managed pubs, and then over the course of the next 6 years, through acquisition, we kind of grew that estate. We kind of more than doubled it, always within the managed space. So it was a big acquisitive job, and taking different pub companies and kind of bolting them onto our model. That culminated with the biggest acquisition in the history of UK pubs when we acquired EI Group in 2020. And we acquired that business 3 weeks before COVID. So you can imagine the kind of hiatus of you've suddenly acquired an enormous business with a different operating model. And then within 3 weeks, you are closing every single pub in the land. I mean, to say it was, I know COVID was complicated and difficult for everyone, but that was a squeaky bum moment. Uh, and then what's really interesting is the without wishing to go too much into the models of Pubco, the strategy was to take a lot of the EIG sites, which were lease and tenanted businesses, where you had a publican, so we didn't employ anybody. You had a publican who ran the pub. The premise was that a lot of those businesses could be transferred into the managed business, so look to grow the managed estate. And with all of the changes that we've seen in the last few years in terms of cost pressure, inflationary pressure, complexity, we've actually completely transformed the strategy. And we're now moving managed businesses into the lease and tenanted model. Hence why, as you said, our employee numbers are actually reducing. So it's been a complete pivot. And it also means that you need to change the capability you have in the organization. It's a huge transformation agenda. So how you communicate to people, how you lead people through that, how you engage people through that. So yeah, absolutely fascinating 14 years with so many different challenges over the course of it.
There's two component parts of the business that I want to pull out specifically and talk about, and L&T is one of them. The other part is obviously Craft Union, which is again led by Fraser Grimbleby, who's doing an incredible job. I think it's up to 650 sites now, and it's like I think it's up 7.5% year on year from kind of like a little bit of research that I was kind of like looking into and doing. Now, if you were just reading the headlines in the non-trade press, you would think hospitality was dead on its knees.
Yeah.
But when you look at those numbers within the biggest pub company in the world, so I'll keep on mentioning that accolade, it's incredible that that business turnaround is happening. Like, why do you think that's happening, and what's the culture like within that part of the business?
Well, the first thing to say is it has not been easy. So there's been we talk very openly about our transformation agenda, and whilst it is working, it's not been easy to get there. And as you know, there's been lots of challenges, not least from a people perspective. But I guess the answer to your question is that we were privileged and lucky that we had both a diversity of our pub estate that gave us options in terms of what models we could operate. But then also, candidly, under David's leadership, we demonstrated the strategic ability and willingness to pivot and to actually change our approach. And we recognize that actually going to what we define as a much more partnership-led business, we're actually pretty agnostic in terms of which business model any of our pubs sit in. The simple question is it the right model for the community they serve, and is it the right model for our P&L, if you really want to boil it down? Craft Union was a business that was there already. It was sort of just coming to EIG had created it. So it was a relatively small business, I think from memory, fewer than 300 sites when we acquired the business. But we immediately saw its potential because in its simplest form, you have an operator running the pub who takes a percentage of the weekly take, and from that, they pay their team. So that strong incentive to drive the top line and manage the business in its most efficient way is a classic example of entrepreneurialism. So we get the product, we put the product in the pub, we have the expertise of how to operate that pub. We can help them with things, we determine a pricing strategy, but then you get all of the drive and the commitment and an amazing community alignment around the Craft Union business. And it just works really, really well with superb leadership, as you say, from Fraser and the team. So it's just a model that we immediately realised could work. And the pub partners or lease and tenanted business is similar in so much as, it's an entrepreneur running that pub. Again, they have a contractual relationship with us. But the lease and tenancy business is far more diverse in terms of the range of businesses that it could have within it. But again, we can obviously supply the product to our publicans, and we have regional managers who bring their level of business insight. But really, in that business, it's very much about ensuring that you allow that publican to do the right thing for the business.
So in terms of, I just mentioned the kind of media side of things, obviously being pretty negative about the hospitality sector at the moment. What challenges do you think that this brings up when especially when you're attracting and retaining talent?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there there are plenty of challenges out there, and lots of people who are prepared to talk about them. Um, I mean, you'll know this better than me, Christian. It's a bit of a weird employment market at the minute because there's a lot of people out there looking for stuff. There is undoubtedly some reticence and nervousness at times at a headline level. We tend to find that if you get beyond that and actually describe the business and describe the culture and describe what we're seeking to do, actually you can still attract really, really good people. And at a pub level, I mean, it's still astonishing how many, I'm amazed at how many applicants we still get per vacancy, probably around 45 applicants for every vacancy in our pub. If you were to cast your mind back to the immediate post-COVID surge where nobody could find anyone to work, I mean, you were lucky if you got two or three. So there's no issue in that. But I think at a corporate level, you have to just make sure that you're really clear about our transformation strategy, what's working. You're bringing that strategy to life in terms of attracting people.
Absolutely. Now, a little bit more about the people agenda, because you guys do a massive amount around well-being, around talent, around diversity and inclusion. Can you give us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, the talent one is so interesting because just as I described the evolution of the business and therefore the evolution of the strategy, it's a classic example of where no HR strategy sits in isolation. It's got to fundamentally support and deliver the business strategy. So to bring it to life from a talent perspective, probably the first 10 years there was so much focus on accelerated internal development of our pub teams to create deputy managers and general managers of the future, because that helped support that acquisitive strategy where the managed business was growing so quickly. And then, of course, you get to the point where the strategy pivots and actually we're employing fewer people and a lot of our teams are transferring to publicans. And you then got to think about, well, what are the capability requirements and what do you need from your leaders through that very different environment? So a lot more focus around developing skills around leadership through disruption, about how you communicate and engage teams through that, even the kind of stuff like, well, the capability of driving efficiency and looking for those business opportunities. So that talent agenda has really evolved and kind of migrated as the business strategy has changed. The well-being and inclusion piece is, I think, a really good example of Stonegate at its best in terms of strong leadership commitment to it. So we're very, very clear about the fact that we are actually a very diverse business in terms of people's background, in the way that we operate a meritocracy where people can grow very quickly. But we also let the business get on with it. So we drive our wellbeing and inclusion agenda through a series of ambassadors who have volunteered, who come together on a quarterly basis, and they shape the agenda for us. They tell the business where we should be putting our focus, where we might want to evolve some of our policy thinking. They do a lot of the communication and engagement activity within the organization. So it doesn't feel like it's a corporate activity being driven. It feels much more organic and from within the business, which I think we do really, really well.
Absolutely. Now, tell us, like, I mean, because for those watching who maybe don't run like tenanted businesses on that kind of side of things, when you're kind of like influencing those individuals about like how they manage their teams and all of that side of things, because they're not Stonegate employees per se, tell us a little bit about the difference there and how you kind of influence that.
But it's really interesting because that's one of the many fascinating things about our business. So you've got, effectively, if you think about our ops teams, you've got three groups of multi-unit leaders. You've got the managed business area managers, where a lot of people from retail would recognize that. It's a large employee base. You're there to ensure the safe running of the pubs. You've obviously got to do all of the people related stuff. In the craft union business, it's that kind of slightly hybrid model because it's our supply chain, it's our pricing structure, but you are still partnering with an entrepreneur who's paying, who's employing their own team, and you're that kind of business counsel. And then over in the pub partners business, it's a more removed relationship. A publican partner RM might have 45 pubs. They're seeing that publican probably much less frequently than you would expect a managed area manager. And it's much more the skill set of influencing and sharing best practice and sharing knowledge and seeding ideas for the publicans. A lot of our RMs will say, you never tell. It's not about saying you must do this. It's, have you thought about this? Or actually, I've got another publican who's doing really well when they tried that rhythm of the week or they tried that product. So it's a different relationship, and there are commonalities. The obvious one being these are roles that are all looking after pubs, but there are subtle differences because of the nature of the operating model.
Absolutely. And again, if you were to read the headlines in terms of like X number of pubs closing every day and every week and every year and all of that kind of side of things, again, you guys seem to be developing and building kind of like a thriving business within that kind of environment. What would you say the special sauce is in terms of like, running kind of like an amazing kind of like hospitality venue? What's the commonality that's running through these pubs that are successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that lies at the heart of our revised strategy, where we talk about the fact that we partner with great entrepreneurs. And that doesn't matter if it's, that could be one of our general managers, a craft union operator, a publican. I think the magic is they get the community they serve, they get their customer base or their guest profile, and then they just deliver amazing hospitality. And it's funny, isn't it? Because the world changes. The world changes, obviously, and post-COVID, probably the biggest accelerated change any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. And yet that fundamental aspect of hospitality, which is guests just want to come in, have an amazing experience, and it's an experience, it's not a product, have an amazing experience in a great atmosphere, and they leave feeling better than they did when they walked through the door. That's an anchor that will never change. And the best publicans and operators and managers deliver that consistently time after time.
Absolutely. And coming a little bit onto your personal journey, now you studied history at university, didn't you?
You've been doing your research, Christian. Yes, I did.
Me? No, never. But what got you into HR to start off with? Because that's a bit of a step, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I remember people saying that at the time, kind of, what's history got to do with HR? And the answer is not very much. Um, so I started my career at Asda. I was at Leeds Uni, and Asda obviously headquartered in Leeds. And I wanted to stay in Leeds. And I thought, strangely enough, this will make you smile. I thought that I would be brilliant at recruiting because I would be able to meet people and kind of read their minds and work out what makes them tick. And I applied for a recruitment job at Asda, and they said, we haven't got a recruitment job, but you can work in payroll. And I thought, okay, I'll go and work in payroll. So my first job was working in payroll for Asda. And strangely enough, having thought that recruitment would be my thing, it's probably the part of HR that I like the least, but obviously you have to do it. But yeah, that was the background, and it got into it. And do you know what? I very quickly realised that what I liked about HR was, without sounding cliched, people make businesses work, yeah. But also, I think that through my career, what I've always tried to do is ground HR in that basis of people make the difference, and therefore the HR team, the HR strategy has got to be grounded in the business and grounded in the strategy, and always make that connection. It can never work in isolation and just be this, or they're the people team. It's no, we're the team that helps the business deliver its strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one word which keeps on coming up specifically in the pub sector more than kind of any other is about building resilience into your teams. There's so many cost pressures and legislation changes and all of this kind of stuff, kind of like across kind of like, the different kind of groups. And especially for these people from kind of like multi-unit level management, kind of like right the way throughout, how are you building that resilience in? I mean, is there special kind of training courses that you're putting in or?
One of my team did develop and deliver a program on resilience, which people were free to attend. Got some great feedback about it. I think it can't just be about that. I think it's interesting. I think there is a degree of some people have that inner resilience, and it's there in them. But I think then it's about a number of different things. I think firstly, you've got to have the support infrastructure in the business for people if they need a bit of help. Now, that can be colleagues, that can be their boss, that can actually be going to something like the Licensed Trade Charity as an example. And I do think it is intrinsically about having a culture where people can talk about issues if they have them, where they can feel safe to raise issues, and where they'll get the right balance of support from the business. I think that's really, really important. And of course, we've got that responsibility, the fundamental responsibility, just to make sure we're giving people jobs that are fair, are reasonable, that the workload's okay. That listen, we don't always get it right. I don't think any bit. I would never say that, but I do think we seek to do the right thing in that respect.
And what about yourself as a leader, kind of like in terms of like taking care of your own mental health, your well-being, staying positive, that kind of side of things? I mean, I've asked different people these questions. Some people go for a walk, some people have a cold shower, some people, just about everything. What are your tricks to kind of stay positive?
Yeah, I don't have cold showers. I can guarantee I can't think of anything worse. I mean, I'm very, very lucky with the colleagues I have around me, with the team I have, because I can talk to people and people are very supportive. I've always I feel lucky that I've always been one of these people that no matter how bad a day has been, I can kind of wake up the next morning and have that fresh spring in my step. Listen, I do a moderate amount of exercise, and I think that helps. I think it's also just about having balance in your life. I think my team and I did a thing a while ago about personal value sets and what we do, and um, I I can step away from that moment, even if I know there's stuff that still needs to be done. I can step away and do something that makes me feel happy. That could be going for a walk. That could be spending time with the family. That could be taking the dogs out, playing the piano, which I love to do. Just doing stuff that is not work and that refreshes me seems to do the job.
Absolutely. And now for two final questions. First one, just on technology.
Mm.
So we're seeing lots of different systems and processes and things like that kind of coming into organizations where they're communicating with their workforce on that kind of side of things and creating better processes, etc. Which one do you use, which kind of like you found most beneficial that keeps the human element at the same time?
Yeah, well, this is an area I think that is evolving at pace and will continue to evolve at pace. And I'm not a tech expert, Christian. I'll be honest with you about that. I mean, we are now. I think so. We've implemented effectively what was originally what you might call an FAQ platform. In other words, the vehicle through which, whether it be publicans, whether it be operators, whether our own team can raise questions, um, and into one repository, if you like. And now what we're doing, of course, is we're making that automated through the use of bots and self-learning, so that you're giving people the access to the information they need real time at any point, and it's a self-learning tool as well. And I think that is making a very, very big difference. And to bring that to life now, the most obvious one is online ordering for our publicans. So actually, it we were finding it hard to push beyond about 60% of our publicans actually ordering online. There was still a big preponderance of picking up the phone, and now we're into the high 90% of people actually ordering online, which is better for our publicans and better for the business.
Absolutely. And last question is on talent attraction, and I guess kind of like, a little bit on the retention side of things, but where the media has been so negative about the hospitality trade, and I guess the hospitality media has also been negative about the hospitality trade. I think the unknown kind of byproduct of that is that when people are selecting careers, it's like, fewer and fewer people from this country are looking at seeing long-term futures for themselves within the sector. How do you think we turn that around, and what kind of like development tools are you using at the moment, kind of like across Stonegate to progress future leaders?
Yeah. I think it is, you're right. The kind of, you could read the press and think that hospitality is dead. It never will be. And I think people have a fundamental need to socialize. And I think that we have businesses in hospitality that do an amazing job in servicing that, businesses across the sector. And I'm an eternal optimist, and this will pass, and it doesn't mean that the world is going to go back to how it was, because the world will continue to evolve. But people will always want to come into the pub. They'll always want to have a great eating out experience. I genuinely believe that, and we've just got to keep being really positive about what a fundamentally exciting and fulfilling career it can be. One of the proudest things about my time with Stonegate, when I look back to the early days when we were on that very accelerated internal progression journey, was just seeing thousands of people in their 20s come through the business, learn amazing new skills, taking responsibility for businesses, turning over millions of pounds a year, leading teams of 20, 30, 40 people in their 20s and doing an amazing job. There are very, very few businesses and sectors that can do that. And we've just got to keep reminding people of that brilliance and bringing that to life. And that, I think, that will always be the case, that we've always been a sector that has excelled at that.
Absolutely. Really good answer. And in terms of like a little bit about leadership learning that you're doing in the business at the moment, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, that's so interesting enough. We kicked something off last month. This is very much about the context of leading through disruption. So we are. It kind of builds on your last point, which is the world continues to be disruptive, particularly for hospitality. And actually, you can look at that through two lenses. Yeah, you can either say, "God, this is hard. Isn't this terrible? Why does this all have to happen?" Or you say, "Well, actually, I've got to grasp that nettle, and actually, I've got to almost be the positive disruptor." And that's exactly the learning that we're putting in place for our ops board and our leadership team. It's a combination of internal delivery from somebody we brought in to do it. We're using quite a lot of the Stephen Covey material as well, because we've got a partnership with them. But all about how you turn disruption into a positive. That doesn't mean you ever forget the impact it can sometimes have on individuals, because that's really important. But nevertheless, from a business perspective, embracing and grappling with disruptive in a positive way. And I think that is going to continue to be a challenge for leaders. And I think that's not unique to our sector either.
Excellent. Well, well done on introducing that. Nine habits of highly effective people, isn't it? That's what
Seven
you're doing?
Habits, yeah, that was the original Covey work that we did 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, there you go. Making a resurgence, right? Tim, thank you very much for having a chat with us. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Christian. All the best.